Hello and welcome to the Evaluate video, brought to you by the Writing Center. The purpose of this video is to help you evaluate the reliability and the usability of sources you've already located for a research project. Currently, the college's assessment initiative is focused on the goal of information literacy. Here, we see that evaluating is one of 6 skills associated with information literacy, and it refers to your ability to determine not only a source's credibility, but also its relevance to your research project. We'll begin by looking at how to determine whether or not a source is credible. First, let's consider the 3 indicators of source credibility. Later in the video, each of these indicators will be covered in greater detail. Number 1, source type. Which types of publications are the most credible? 2, source author. What does the author's background have to do with the credibility? And 3, source content. What do the types of information within a source reveal about the source's credibility? When considering source type, we must recognize that with the variety of publication types comes a spectrum of credibility, with some publications ranking high and some ranking low. In the case of books, credibility varies as much as books themselves do. For instance, fiction lacks credibility on most academic projects because its content derives from imaginative methods rather than research methods. Nonfiction, on the other hand, has credibility, though amounts vary depending on research methods. While the credibility of books varies, scholarly journal articles enjoy the most consistently high levels of credibility. One reason for this is the peer review process. Every academic discipline has one or more journals dedicated to publishing scholarship in that field. Furthermore, each of these journals employs a team of editors whose job it is to scrutinize submissions to the journal in order to maintain the highest levels of credibility. Over time, it is this editorial peer review process that creates a legacy of credibility. Magazines are a type of publication students often find enticing because their content is usually more accessible than the technical information and jargon employed by many academic journals. However, the credibility of magazines is often suspect. For instance, they rarely use a peer review process or include sources or citations. Popular magazines have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, whereas trade and professional magazines may generally be seen as somewhat more credible. While it is a well-known fact that many newspapers stake their reputations on the credibility of their sources, the editorial process they use still is not as rigorous as the one used by most academic journals. In this table, note that the peer review process uses more highly qualified individuals to scrutinize a draft of an article than that used by the editorial hierarchy used by both newspapers and magazines. Furthermore, notice that in scholarly journal articles, a variety of citation styles are used and references are always included, a fact usually not present in newspaper or magazine articles. Of course, in this day and age, there's a great temptation to use the results of internet search engines as sources for research projects. However, the credibility of most of these sources is in question, so how do we determine credibility? Ironically, a quick Google search about the credibility of sources provides a number of helpful resources with hints for determining the credibility of online sources. Here we see a list of 7 or 8 different hints that include things like, is there any evidence that the author of the web information has some authority in the field about which she or he is providing information? With what organization or institution is the author associated? Remember, credibility for an individual author is often provided by the institution or the publication he or she is writing for. Does the author have publications in peer-reviewed publications? Are there clues that the author or authors are biased? Is the information current? Does the information have a list of works cited? And so on. All of these things and more can be taken into consideration by anyone performing a search. Additionally, you might want to think at least about domain suffixes. Oftentimes, the suffix .edu is considered to be of high credibility due to its affiliation with institutions of higher education. Additionally, government sites are held to a high level of scrutiny. From there, things get a little more tricky. .orgs, which are associated with nonprofit organizations, can sometimes be trying to sell ideas to users and need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Let's return for just a moment to this slide from earlier. We've taken a pretty thorough look at source type and how the type of source can impact credibility. Now we're ready to look at the author's identity and how that impacts credibility. Several key factors about an author's background are used to determine the author's credibility. However, no single factor should be used to necessarily make or break that credibility. Rather, it's an assessment of all of these factors together that should help determine the author's credibility. And finally, we're ready to look at the last feature of determining source credibility, the source's content, and what the types of information within a source reveal about the source's credibility. Though information itself can be hard to categorize, certain types of information do more readily reveal the source's credibility. For instance, the point of view used by the author of the source can be telling. While first-person narratives are often compelling, third-person prose often suggests a higher level of objectivity. Also, the types of support used within a source are extremely important. Facts, statistics, opinion, anecdote, examples, explanations, all these things help validate a source's credibility. Also, understanding the types of research and research methods used by the author of a source reveals a lot about the integrity of a given study. That concludes the portion of this video about determining source credibility. Now we're ready to move on to the next topic, determining source relevance. Let's begin with 3 questions about determining source relevance. First, how applicable is the source to your research project? Next, how well does the source's scope fit the needs of your research project? And finally, how does the source's date of publication relate to your research project? We'll cover all those in upcoming slides. We'll begin with the 3-step test to determine applicability. We'll use this example situation. Let's say you're writing an essay about abolishing the death penalty. Step 1 is a title query. Just because search results contain your search keywords doesn't mean they'll be applicable to a particular research project. Take, for instance, the 4 results visible on this page. If you want, take a minute, pause the video, and discuss which of these 4 are the most applicable. 2 are more applicable than the other 2. Okay, we're back. You should have come up with the answer that results 3 and 5 are more applicable than results 2 and 4. Step 2 is an abstract examination. If the title seemed relevant, next read the article abstract to determine if the general content still seems to be a good fit with your project. And step 3 in the applicability test is text perusal. There's simply no substitute for actually reading, or at the least skimming a text to determine its ultimate relevance to your project. The next facet of determining source relevance is understanding a source's scope. Essentially, the scope of a source can be determined by considering the number of subjects studied by the source, the level of specificity expressed in the source's observations and conclusions, and by the source's geographic implications. With the biggest dangers here being that the number of subjects is too small, the level of specificity too vague, or that the geographical implications are inconsistent with those of your project. The third facet of determining source relevance is publication date. Depending on the needs of your research project, you may need sources with newer or older publication dates. For instance, let's say your research topic is the Great Depression and the New Deal, and you find 2 sources, one from 1934 and one from 2009. In this case, it could be that the 1934 publication is actually more desirable because your topic is so historical in nature. On the other hand, let's say your research topic is immigration reform. There you find 2 sources, one from 2015 another from 1936. In this case, the 2015 article is probably more desirable because your topic is so contemporary in nature. And one final thing about publication dates. Remember that when you're using search engines and databases, that typically you can control the chronological order of your results, though often the default setting is for relevance. Alright, well that does it for the Evaluate video brought to you by the Writing Center. Please let us know if you have any questions. We're located in C214. Thanks for watching.